Great. Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you for doing this. Do I have permission to use your name, image, and likeness in this video?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. All right. So I'm just going to go through some basic policy. I'm making this show for young voters at specifically at ASU. I do comedy on the side of my degree, which is mechanical engineering. And so I'm just going to make a show like that. And I'm just going through different politicians and just hearing about their basic policy. So yeah, so here's some just some questions. We're going to jump around a little bit.
Okay.
How impactful is illegal immigration to Arizonans right now?
I think it's extremely impactful, and I think it will get more impactful if the numbers of illegal crossings go in the vicinity of 200,000 or more a month, which appears to be happening now. And it's impactful in a number of ways. One, of course, would be the expense to the taxpayer. From a taxpayer's perspective, they do tend to drain police services. There's also a problem with respect to schools, that their children do receive education in schools, and that's rather expensive for us also. They probably suppress the wages, although that would probably be among people making lower income jobs who they would be competing with, but by the same token. Not to mention the fact that it's basically a horrible policy to allow people into the country who jump the line ahead of other people who are waiting all over the world to be for their numbers to come so they can arrive here. So I think it's expensive, and I think it's morally deficient in what they're doing, and the fact that many people accept their line jumping.
See, and it so then you'd say it's very important that Arizona continued building the wall.
Yes, in areas where the wall can be built, it would be a physical wall. In other areas where there are still crossings, it could be a virtual wall where border patrol agents would be alerted to breaches and they could respond.
Understood. Understood. There's been criticism of the election integrity in Arizona. Do you think, well, in the 2020 presidential election, do you think that there was voter fraud in Arizona in that election?
Well, I think there's always voter fraud. The question is how much voter fraud. When you mail out 85% of your ballots to people, some of those ballots are going to find their way into the hands of other people who don't have the right to vote with those ballots. And some of those people will have easy access to these signatures and they can vote for the person. So I think that there's always a certain amount of fraud. The extent of which is hard to say. They did an audit. They came up with some, but the problem with fraudulent mail-in ballots that are intercepted by others is that you really don't know, because if a person has access to somebody else's signature, and by the way, everybody has access to everybody's signatures. If you've done any paperwork like mortgages and the like that get filed with the recorder, anybody can go to the county recorder site and look at the documents that you signed. So, and those are never caught. The people who do the signature comparisons between the signature on record and the signature on the envelope of the early ballot, they don't require an exact match, because quite frankly, nobody signs their name exactly the same every time. Are you hurried? Are you standing? What kind of surface, what kind of pen? So, I mean, some of that goes through. How much, I really don't know. And I'm sure there was also some illegal ballot harvesting. But again, it's difficult to determine how much of that went on. So quantitatively, it's there, but I don't know the amount. But we do what we best to minimize the opportunities.
Gotcha. Okay. And so do you think that there ever was a truly fair presidential election that occurred in the US?
I would suppose so. I mean, I don't. Hopefully the level of fraud was, but maybe I should really take that back, because there were real serious questions about the race, the Kennedy-Nixon race, going way back, Chicago voter fraud. So I don't know. I guess, and I'm not a historian, so I really couldn't say. But I think there have been some questionable elections, at all levels.
Gotcha. Okay. If you had the opportunity to vote on the legality of gay marriage, how would you vote?
Well, I don't think I would. I would support the civil unions, or I think they were called, as opposed to the actual marriage.
Support the civil unions. So then you would vote for gay marriage?
No, against.
Against. Got it. Okay. How big of a role does religion play in your policymaking, if at all?
Uh, well, I was born and raised Catholic, and I believe in those tenets. I go to church, so I don't really know if it's so much religion that plays a role as the religious beliefs that I hold, which make me be a Catholic and also make other ethical decisions. So I don't look at the Catholic Church, position on an issue, but I adhere to those principles, especially pro-life, and that's the way I vote. But it's not because I'm Catholic; it's because those are my beliefs, and it's great that they align with my religion too.
Got it. So in your opinion, what's to blame for the high rates of gun violence in this country?
First, I think it's culture. We have a pretty violent culture. Yeah, I mean, look at the movies, the TV shows. So I guess to some degree that might desensitize people. But if you're talking about these horrendous mass shootings, I believe most of them are because of serious mental illness. And in fact, as the days go by, you begin to see more and more information that these individuals were seriously mentally ill. It's kind of interesting that they're almost always male. And a lot of these shooters are 18, 20 years old, which happens to be when schizophrenia begins to demonstrate in males with schizophrenia. So I think serious mental illness is a very, very big part of the mass shootings. Now, the culture, I think that might really be part of the everyday street shootings. I mean, Chicago has this massive epidemic of street shootings. And a lot of it is cultural in that it's gang related. And I think gangs are subcultures of society that adhere to violence. They like violence. Violence is an instrumental tool for them to accomplish their goals, be it getting rid of other gangs or robbing or protecting drug transactions. So I think, I think there's, the individual criminal type shootings are very much cultural. The mass shootings are very often serious mental illness. And then there are other situations where people just lose it.
Gotcha. Okay. So if it is based on mental health, what legislation have you passed or are you planning to sponsor or anything like that to push mental health, either checks or anything to stop this, because it is a crisis? So
yeah, it's very difficult because what happened was the U.S. Supreme Court many years ago ruled that a person can only be taken into custody against their will because psychiatrically, if they're a threat, a serious threat to themselves, like suicidal or others. And it's extremely difficult to prove that. And there's a lot of due process involved. On top of that, because of the discovery of active psychotropic drugs, which can control schizophrenia when they're being taken. A lot of the mental patients were released during the 1950s and 60s. There was supposed to be follow-up street care for them, but that never really materialized. So you have people who have schizophrenia and other mental illnesses who, when they're on medication, are reasonably under control, who wander away, stop taking their medication, and they wind up on the street, and they're severely mentally ill, and some of them, most of them are not violent. I don't want to create that impression, but some of them become paranoid and delusional and violent. Now we have been putting more money into seriously mentally ill for street care for them. But it's difficult because the civil liberties really prevent you from restricting their freedom to the point where you can be sure that they're taking their medication.
So you would say for the large part of this problem, there isn't really anything that we can do to stop mass shootings.
Very difficult. Again, you would have to get constitutional changes to allow for the easier apprehension and holding, and then later institutionalization of people who have serious mental illness, who have perhaps shown a propensity to go off their drugs. Because the problem is, and I was a police officer for 20 years in New York, and I took many people who were emotionally disturbed, who I saw on the streets, to Bellevue Hospital for psychiatric evaluation, and many of them were kept for further evaluation. But what happens is the person is schizophrenic, they're on a psychotropic drug, they stop taking the drug, they start to wander the street, they're homeless, they're eventually picked up by the police. They're brought to a hospital for observation, and the hospital immediately gives them psychotropic drugs. They become stabilized. They're no longer exhibiting the really severe mental disorder that caused the police to be able to take them into custody and for them to be held. So that once they're taking their medication, legally they must be released again. But there's no real way to really closely follow them on the street. So when they suddenly skip their medication, they become a little psychotic again, and they wander away, then they're totally off medication, and they're back where they are until they're picked up again by the police. So it becomes a vicious circle. You'd have to have a lot more money for street social workers, and they probably have to have more authority to control these people and perhaps institutionalize them if they are chronic people who stop taking their medication and wander away. But that's unconstitutional. So amend the Constitution. It's tough.
Gotcha. Okay. So why is this great, mental health crisis really only seen in the U.S.?
Well, I think you do have, to a certain degree, in other countries. I mean, they've had some of these situations in Europe. It's a good question. I really don't know. Maybe they have a better system to confine these people. I'm not familiar with their laws. So maybe they do, in fact, have these people institutionalized, or have a more effective kind of authoritarian way to control them when they're on the street. But I suspect, to a certain degree, the laissez-faire, hands-off attitude of America, is something which makes it harder for people, for the U.S. and the laws and the court system to mandate people do things. And there could be a cultural thing here too.
Understood. Okay.
I'm not the most qualified person to weigh in on that area. I'll admit where I have academic deficiencies.
Yes, yeah, and I don't have the information to support that either. Although I have rough figures that I can't quote right now because I don't want to misquote.
Yeah, no, and I'm not denying the differential. It's just kind of, why is that is a strange question. I mean, what are the differences between us and Europe? And cultural, I guess culture would be the big thing.
There are a lot of cultural differences in between every single country, but there's a huge difference in the number of people that die from guns in the U.S. versus anywhere else in the world. I mean, we have 120 guns per 100 people, and the general argument from, I hear, the right is that the more guns that we have, the less this will happen, but somehow we still have the most mass shootings.
Yeah, I think the argument from the right is that the law-abiding person are the people who are doing this. If you look at Chicago, it's a lot of street gang violence that are killing not only other gang members, but kids in their apartments at night get hit and killed by stray bullets. So and the right says you lock these people up for a long time, but the left isn't too thrilled with that. The left would rather try to get rid of the guns, but there are more guns than people in this country, and we have 350 million people. And most of the guns are in the hands of perfectly law-abiding people. So are you going to, first, you could never round them up to begin with, not to mention the fact that now people can make guns on computers with special 3D printers that they can purchase, anywhere. So you're never going to round them all up. So I think I think what you need to do is you need to really crack down legally on people who are breaking the law, deal with the mental illness issue also.
Gotcha. The round them all up argument. Yeah, I get.
But I should say, not when they commit crimes and they're arrested, you put them in jail and prison. I don't say go door to door and round up gang members. Yeah. You get tough when they commit a crime.
Gotcha. I was talking about rounding. I thought you were talking about rounding up guns. Like we can't round up all the guns.
I don't think you. I mean, look, this country would not. First of all, you can't do it because the Second Amendment clearly would prevent that. And the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that the Second Amendment is not related to a militia; it's an individual right. So, if you can't, stop somebody from having a handgun in their apartment in Chicago, you certainly aren't going to be, taking people's hunting rifles and their self-defense handguns out of their homes. The Second Amendment wouldn't allow that. And none of the proponents of gun control have ever even tried the process of amending the Second Amendment. Because I think they know it could never happen. Because, it's in the Bill of Rights and it's a very popular amendment.
Yes, yeah, we like that amendment a lot here. All right, so moving on to
not necessarily on campus because you can't have guns there. So
yeah, exactly. So moving on to abortion. You are pro-life, as you mentioned before, so against abortion. Do you think any contraceptive devices fall under that? Is there anything that should be outlawed as well?
I don't believe any contraceptives are. I wouldn't count the morning after pill as a contraceptive because that's designed to terminate a fertilized egg. But like the birth control pill, I don't believe so.
Gotcha. How have you got the input of women to inform this decision on your stance on abortion?
Well, I don't know. I mean, how do you get the input of fetuses who would be killed? It's not an issue of, I think all human beings, let me talk from my perspective. Mm-hmm. From my perspective, I sincerely believe that the fetus is a human being. That's my belief. I don't think it is an unviable tissue mass. And that's not even so much a religious belief. I mean, I've just seen pictures of developing fetuses, and to me, they're human beings. And as the science gets better and better, we see that more and more. So for me, this is not about depriving a woman of a right to choose, because I don't think anybody has the right to choose to kill another human being. So I'm simply saying you can't kill people, and they're people, even though they aren't born. Now, I understand that there are people who are pro-choice who sincerely do not believe that the fetus is a human being. They think it's an unviable tissue mass, much like, take your appendix out, okay? I think they're wrong. I think if they get an abortion, it's tragic, but I do not believe that they're killers. However, I think if a person honestly believed that the fetus was a human being and still supported abortion, then I think they would be heinously and immorally promoting the killing of human beings.
Gotcha. So
I mean, it just comes down to, do you think the fetus is a human being? And much of the acrimony and arguments between pro-life and pro-choice people are that they don't realize that the other side thinks that. I think a lot of pro-life people think that pro-choice people think they're human beings but want to kill them anyway for convenience, and vice versa. That pro-choice people think that we're just trying to suppress women and take away their rights, when in reality it's just a matter of the life of the unborn.
Gotcha. So you're in support of smaller government, is that correct?
Depends in what area. I'm not in support of smaller, law enforcement to control crime. I don't like unnecessary regulation, though.
Gotcha. So if Roe v. Wade was to be overturned, let's say we have stricter abortion laws and maybe it's completely outlawed, what would your steps be to then you'd have to increase the government, because just like what you were saying with immigration, the more people that are here, the more we're going to have to spend on really everything. So if there's more people, 13,000 people got an abortion last year in Arizona. So that's 13,000 more people. And so there's going to have to be, more roads, more housing, more everything, more jobs. What legislation would you try to push, or do you have any plan for that?
Are you talking about that? Are you basically saying that there'd be more people because there'd be less abortions?
Yes.
Oh, well, first, I think a lot of women would leave Arizona and go to California to get the same abortion. Some would probably be a lot more careful in terms of birth control. So I don't think you quite have the same number of potential abortions. But hey, we can survive with more people. In fact, increased population very often increases economic development. With illegal immigration, the problem is you have people who are coming in with virtually no education, no skills. So they become more of a burden because they wind up drawing government services. But in terms of, regular US families growing up and everything, Arizona is thriving, Florida is thriving, Texas is thriving because people are moving there, creating jobs, working there. So it's not a drain on the economy. It helps the economy. People are good.
Okay. So yeah, moving on now. How would you define a white supremacist?
Somebody who believes that, and by the way, I've probably got to leave in about 10, just so if you want to prioritize stuff. So a white supremacist would be somebody who believes that that white people are superior to other races and should get better benefits or should oppress other races. Yeah. That's
Gotcha.
kind of pretty standard definition.
Yep. You have said that everybody shouldn't be voting. That is correct, right?
No, what I basically, that was an argument that circled around some of the election laws. And the issue was, should we automatically register people to vote? And I said, I don't think we should automatically register people to vote. I don't have a problem making registration available if somebody's getting their driver's license and they can check the box and say, yes, I want to vote. But I wouldn't register people who don't want to vote. And that's what automatic voter registration is. And I said, and then the argument came up that, well, if somebody is not interested in voting, does not want to vote, then they probably don't follow government issues and policies and politics and different affairs. So they were probably very informed. So, they're not the highest quality voter. Again, because they're not interested in that. Because if they were interested in government politics and what have you, they would say, yes, I want to vote. But these are people who just aren't interested at all. And I was talking to a CNN reporter. And I said to her, I said, you are a CNN reporter. Your job is politics. You report on it, you study it, you live it 40 hours a week or more. I said, I think you're a higher quality voter than somebody who has no interest whatsoever and doesn't even watch the news. I mean, there are different levels, and people who don't want to vote are probably not that informed. So I don't see any, I think it's pretty commonsensical that someone who doesn't care to vote, doesn't follow politics, will probably not have as much of an informed qualitative vote as somebody who's really into it and follows things. And I'm not talking quality based on whether you're conservative or liberal. I'm talking the amount of knowledge you have that you use to make your vote, regardless if you're on the left or the right or anywhere else.
I think with that kind of thinking, you get into a real slippery slope that tends to stray from the democratic process, which is everything that this is built on.
No, because the democratic process isn't to force people to be registered to vote against their will. The democratic process is, if you want to vote, you can vote, and I fully support that. I don't have a problem with somebody being given a registration form when they get their driver's license. I have a problem with somebody saying, you're registered whether you want to or not. I don't think that's democracy.
But they haven't voted yet. They would just be registered to vote. There's a disconnect there.
What's the purpose of registering them when they don't want to? So
Well,
that mail-in ballots will then be mailed to their house and somebody intercepts it and could use it. That increase, sending ballots to people who aren't there or aren't interested, that also is a potential for voter fraud. If you want to vote, you can vote. If you don't want to vote, I'm not going to force you to be vote. I'm not going to force you to be registered. We don't force people in this country to do stuff like that. This is not China where we'll force you to be registered and then we'll make sure you vote our way. You want to vote, vote. You don't, fine with me. You know, I hope someday you want to, because that's democracy, and the more people who vote, the better. But I'm not forcing people, and there's nothing bad about not forcing people.
gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you very much for this. I appreciate it. That's all the questions that I have.
All right. So this is on a TV show. What is this? I mean, like a campus thing?
It's going to be just a video that I produce myself, and then I'm going to distribute on YouTube,
All
Instagram,
right.
that kind of
Well, why don't you
stuff.
send me a link if you would?
I will, and I will once I cut up this video and I do everything like that, I'll send it to you too, just so I'm on the up and up with you